Thank you. Mayor Carr. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Labar.
Here.
Councilmember Case. Can you
I'm here and we can't hear you guys.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Councilmember Neal.
Here.
Councilmember Path.
Here.
Councilmember Zulawaga.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. If everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
America, we love you. We have no ceremonies, presentations, and appointments. I think we're at additions, deletions, correction to agenda. Anything that you note?
No, sir.
To be clear? Thank
No.
you. Nothing. We're off to the consent calendar, and Suzanne.
Thank you, Mayor Carr. This evening on the consent calendar, if council will recall, we had some errors on the last set of minutes, the July 16th minutes. They have been corrected. They have been sent to you with the corrections in red. So we're looking for approval for those this evening.
Council, do I hear a motion?
Are you okay? I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 16th, 2020 regular council meeting as amended and changed and submitted by our county clerk.
Second.
Clerk.
Second.
Thank you.
Suzanne?
Carr,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Labar,
Yes.
Neal,
Yes.
Path,
Yes.
Zulawaga.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 6-0 unanimously.
Thank you. We're down to public comments on items not on the agenda. We don't have a list in front of me. Is anybody in the audience or Zoom interested in commenting on items not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to unfinished business and consider participation with the Colorado Water Conservation Board study. City Planner Laura Pellegrino, please.
Thank you, Mayor Carr. So tonight, presenting the memo for the partnership between the Colorado Water Conservation Board, FEMA, and the City of Woodland Park to study 10.6 miles of floodplain in the City of Woodland Park. Director Riley presented this memo at the last council meeting, and the councilors wanted more time to review it. We also have here with us tonight on Zoom Rigel Rucker from AECOM, who is the company that is also assisting with this study. If there are any specific questions, he can answer them for us, and I can give you my best shot.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Or do you want to do a presentation with the
You want to start with the
contractor
Yeah.
or not?
Well, I'll go ahead and start with the first question. Can you explain what is the purpose of it? And if we don't do it, what is the effect of not doing it?
So Rob, I'm going to get you to bring Rigel over into panelist so that he can speak. But in a nutshell, Counselor, the purpose of this study is to better define and refine the existing floodplains that exist within the city. If we don't do it, our floodplains remain at the level and scope of study that they exist at right now today.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, Mayor?
Councilmember Zuluaga, please.
Okay, so when were they last reviewed?
I believe the floodplains that exist right now were reviewed in 2009. And then as development comes in, we have map amendments, LOMARs and CLOMARs that get applied. And with those map amendments, there's a review done at that time. But I'd like to ask if Rigel, are you on?
I am, if you can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you. And I think
Okay.
council can hear you too. So if I say anything incorrectly, please correct me. But I think in a nutshell, it's just to update the floodplain mapping and the data that we have.
Yeah, flood risk data, I'll just add that flood risk data changes, whenever there's a flood or when water basically travels through a stream. So the flood insurance rate maps require regular maintenance because of that. It's typically up to the local community to keep those up to date and through the LOMAR process that was just mentioned. So this is, I guess from my perspective, this is an opportunity that the state is bringing some funding forward to do this. So that's probably the one thing to consider on it. The other thing to consider is it does change those boundaries on the maps, which do have insurance and development implications as well, which is listed in that memo.
Right, and I'm sharing a copy of one section of the map of a section of floodplain that is listed on the study memo. So for instance, what we see and what you're looking at now that's shaded in kind of a purple blue is Jenkins Creek and an unnamed tributary off of Trout Creek. So this is one of the areas that will be studied. What's shown in blue is the 100-year floodplain. And then if you zoom out, you can see that they're also studying all of Trout Creek as it goes north. And you can see the existing level of flood and data work that has been done here. So this is an opportunity to bring our maps up to date, bring the flood levels and the flood boundaries up to date, and make them current.
Thank you. I am interested what triggered this action. First of all, I got a couple of questions, but that's the first one.
Rigel?
Sure, I can answer. I can attempt to answer that. So the state has been working with FEMA because FEMA is the one who typically helps with some of the management of this, and the state is a partner and looks at kind of the entire state year to year and determines where these updates might need to occur. Based on development and growth anticipated in this community and in the county as a whole, the state saw that this was could be an opportunity where some studies could be needed. So over the past year, we've been conducting some what we call approximate studies just to see if things are lining up correctly and where some studies might be needed. And so after those, we determined that this could be a location for one of these studies to happen.
If you could tell the public, our public, how, if there's going to be any physical impacts, surveyors, et cetera, in our community, that's one question. The other question I have is budgetary based.
Yes, yeah. So, and I can probably answer that question because I'm guessing what you'll be asking there. Let me answer that one first, assuming it is that CWCB and FEMA are funding this. There's no monetary, there's nothing that the town has to bring forward. So it's all based on funding that's already secured. The only thing that's asked is that the community partner and review the results and then help with some of the community outreach since it is managed on a local level. Now, in terms of if there will be people on the ground, there will. Basically, once the memo's signed, we're going to have surveyors go up and down the stream and collect information on culverts and bridges in the areas that were identified. We'll also have a group of engineers go out and take a look at the conditions of the floodplain. That probably take a couple weeks of people out there. Other than that, we shouldn't have people out there. It would just more be us coming to town to meet and talk about results and get feedback as we go through the process.
Thank you. Councilmember Neal.
On average, what normally happens when you do this? Does the floodplain increase in size or does it decrease in size on average when they redo this?
It's both. So, I mean, all of these updates are based on, science. So we basically look at NOAA rainfall data, historic data is what these are based on, to see what that 100-year flood that was mentioned would be. And then we model these streams using Army Corps of Engineers software to identify what the new floodplain extents are based on that historic rainfall. We've seen both. I don't know if I can comment on what we expect to happen here. So yeah, we've definitely seen it. It's probably on average right about the same, where we've seen just as many increases as decreases.
Councilmember Papp.
Yeah, will you be following a recent CDC guidelines that require you to wear masks in the open air?
Yes, we'll follow any guidelines that are in place at the time when we have people on the ground, including if there's public meetings or any other type of meetings in the area. We create health and safety plans for these, so that is already included in our health and safety plan, assuming we go out and do the work.
Councilmember Case, I don't see you up there, and I want to give you an opportunity to speak if you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to say that I'm grateful that we have this opportunity to have an update done to protect the property in our city limits and to have the knowledge that we need to see how the waters are moving. I appreciate the opportunity without any monetary impact except for maybe staff time and interaction, and look forward to hearing the results of the study. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments from, Councilmember Zuluaga?
Yeah, Regal. Is that how I say it? Regal, is that correct?
Rigel.
Oh, Rigel, sorry.
Yep.
I heard you say it could be a location. Can you point out on a map, either with red highlighter or something, the areas that you think could be a location? And then can you tell me what leads you to suspect it could be an area that needs looking at? Because it's a big state, and it's just interested why you're focusing on Woodland Park.
When you say an area, do you mean like an area of why we decided to study this, or I guess I need a little more clarification.
Yeah, I heard you say that you use science and that
Mhm.
you use rainfall data. So
Correct.
is there something in that data since 2009 that leads you, or has reports from the city that there are areas that have evidence of new flooding that was not prevalent before? And if so, where?
I don't know if I could point to an exact location with that. Basically, NOAA's data, for example, is updated every single year based on rainfall totals. We also use gauge data kind of around the state to look at information. There aren't any gauges here locally, but there are just outside of the county limits. I guess I'd have to look back at any records to see if we had a exact location that we looked at or pinpointed. I think part of it's just more of that maintenance of FEMA has a rolling inventory that you're supposed to look at stuff every 5 years. And so we're already beyond that point. So it's more of a coming back and seeing where that maintenance is needed.
So how much are you spending on the good people of Woodland Park to update this study?
I would have to look up the budget. It is a state budget. I want to say it is around, well, I don't want to paraphrase here. If you give me a minute, I can look up the number for you.
While he's doing that, we'll put you on pause. Any other council comments? Councilmember Papp.
Just a quick comment. It's good that we are doing this and coordinating this. This is something that can go either way, benefiting or causing greater exposure to the 100-year floodplain for citizens, but it serves a purpose of helping us both in the county and in the city to plan what we need to do as new construction comes on, as we look at future plans. Much of this is just the data that's there from the USGS and NOAA and the Corps of Engineers. They do this kind of work all the time, trying to keep things up. That's why we have such a good mapping system in this in this country. So look forward to you doing it. It's pretty harmless, pretty necessary. And frankly, some people will be surprised when they don't need to get flood insurance. That always happens and is always an interesting outcome. Also, I'd like to encourage you to disregard CDC guidelines and do not wear masks out in the open air so that you can breathe properly. There you go. Thanks.
Do we have a budget answer at this point yet? Maybe we can get that to you unless it's critical to your consideration.
There's only one other question I have along that same line.
Councilmember Zuluaga, yes, please.
And the last question I have is, what are the requirements that you have from Woodland Park to be recipients of the funding to do this study?
Sure. So the budget's already been allocated for this. So the only requirements is that kind of basically signing this memo is one of them, just so that we know that, and the main reason for the memo is just for, I guess, historical purposes. If staff switch out or something happens in the next couple of years where people forget that this was initiated. These studies typically take a couple years to get all the way through FEMA's process. And so we've had several instances where we've gotten to the end and new people have come in that weren't aware that the study was going on. And this is kind of our way of making sure that we have a history showing that the study was kind of accepted and everything like that. And then again, the other thing is that there is some support on the local level with the public outreach. But those are the main two things.
And were you able to find out what the cost is for this project?
Yeah, I have a budget sheet that I'm pulling up right now. It's just taking a second to load. Sorry about that. It is approximately $200,000 for the study.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And
Councilmember Neal.
yeah, thank you, Mayor. One last question, and it's actually to the council members. Has any council member received any feedback from the citizens on this? Because I have not, but Mr. Paff's point was very, very important. This can have great ramifications to citizens' insurance, that we could blindside them if suddenly they purchased a house and budgeted that they're not in a floodplain, and then all of a sudden, poof, they're in one. Go ahead, Mr. Paff.
Sorry.
Councilmember Paff.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do anyway. FEMA's going to update it. Eventually, they're going to require it if we haven't done it in time. So you don't
Hold your nose and
Yeah, it's just the way it is. It's also a necessary thing to do for more reasons than just someone's personal insurance, because there's a lot of federal and state planning that goes behind potential flooding, emergency planning and stuff. And so you want to keep these up to date. We're about right on time for what's really needed. About every 10 years is usually good. And that NOAA information is important too, because it allows, it gives a good forecast of potentially of what's going to happen. So the planning for emergency services, as well, that's why FEMA does get involved, are critical. So if we ever had some 100-year flood disaster that happened here, the people that are in the floodplain would need to be taken care of, and you got to get ahead of that. So it's a useful, worthy thing. It's totally normal and helpful. And there would be no reason for whatever consequence related to flood insurance that we would ever want to delay it or obstruct it or deny it or anything. We definitely want to do it. It's really important.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
The Councilmember Case, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to answer Mr. Neal's comment. I just went through the process of selling a home that the current owners were not in a floodplain. They bought it, but the boundaries, the mapping was updated, and the new buyers were required to purchase flood insurance. Know that that is something that is part of the purchase process and the title process, so that it is not something that they cannot terminate the purchase if they don't want to be in a floodplain. So they do have notice and knowledge before they close on the purchase of the property. Just for your information.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Paff.
And one quick comment, you definitely do want to update this because there might be people who previously got put into a floodplain who need to know. And this is a good way for
Mhm.
that kind of notification for their own protection. So another good thing about it.
It's not really public hearing, but if anybody's, oh. Catherine, identify yourself, please.
330 Ponderosa Court. I didn't come to speak to this issue, just once we enough to be here. But I think I can answer your question and give full support.
Can't hear the podium.
Oh, yeah, it came on.
Thank you.
Catherine Perry, 330 Ponderosa Court, Woodland Park. Didn't come to speak to this issue, but I can answer your question and provide support to your position. Formerly, for prior decade, I was the CEO of Choices, our pregnancy center across from the high school, and bought that property in 2009 in the floodplain, expanded it significantly in 2012. At the time, Sally Riley, we looked at the maps. She recognized that the maps were significantly out of date, but could not, it was extremely cost prohibitive to do a Clomar-Lomar process for an individual landowner, homeowner. That's just out of the question. So we ended up with our expansion having to work very carefully, spend a lot of extra money on engineering to get within the floodplain, not the floodway. And then throughout the 2000s, whatever you call that decade, flood insurance rose dramatically to where as of about 2000, probably 2016, we were annually paying over 3% of just the loan value in flood insurance, which is insane. And many, many times when the rains came down like Noah's Ark, I would drive over there and stand in the yard and watch not even a trickle flow through there. So it was very, very frustrating. Ended up having to get very creative to get some private investors to help us get out of the mortgage situation, to get out from under the burden of the flood insurance. So even though things may change and some people may become in the floodplain that weren't before, some might get out. My vote would be, if this provides better accuracy to our flood maps, I would be all for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pellegrino, for adjusting the map so we can see exactly what she was talking about. Appreciate that. Any further comments? Hearing none, we'll close the commentary, and we have on the table tonight a potential motion to endorse having the mayor sign this study memo. Any further discussion before we go to that? None? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the mayor signing the memorandum.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Case,
Yes.
Labar,
Yes.
Neal,
Yes.
Paff,
Yes.
Zuluaga,
Yes.
Barr.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rigel, for your support. Thank you,
All
Clancy.
right. Thank you.
We move on to coronavirus relief fund discussions. And I'm going to read a very long statement and go into several things. And then at the end of that, we're going to have a presentation from Councilmember Neal. But I want to preface this with some background. Council had the best of intentions to distribute assistance to citizens and businesses with limited bureaucratic processing. There were great ideas by Council members Paff and Neal with that goal in mind. We proposed 3 bundles of money to distribute. One went to small businesses who paid sales tax by algorithmic method and a distribution tool. The second was all businesses, regardless of whether they paid sales tax or not, by application and a distribution tool. And finally, citizens financially impacted by COVID-19 by flat distribution. All of those were needs-based. I didn't specify in each one of them, but they're all needs-based. I then sent off a basic foundation plan questions regarding that plan that would tell us the viability of our bureaucratic simplification ideas to reimbursement authorities. We were cautioned not to get emotionally attached to any one tactic until funding authorities answered some basic questions about our methods. We constructed a survey to figure out council consensus on goals of this effort, the cumulative results of which are as follows. Question 1 was, business sales tax contributes greatly to the city of Woodland Park revenues, which approves city services. The bottom line was consensus was yes. Question 2, CVRF funds should be used for the city of Woodland Park for COVID expenses. It was a lukewarm rating. That's my characterization. It's 2.6 out of 5. CVRF funds should go to the individual 8,200 Woodland Park citizens. That was a no. It was under the threshold. Question 4, CVRF funds should go to the small businesses struggling the most or least likely to survive. That was a resounding yes. These are all consensus. These are after we took into consideration all 6 council persons. Question 5, you are comfortable with the city's financial department handling the CVRF processing and review? That was a yes. Question 6 was a CVRF distribution review process limiting administrative overhead with reducing number of applications should be utilized when possible and allowed by funding authorities. In other words, what I just spoke of just before this, it was neutral-ish is how I would characterize it. Question 7, small businesses who do not pay city sales tax should be included. Yes. Next question, if a small business cannot provide financial statements required for application, they should not be reviewed for CVRF funding. That was also a yes. Question 9, if an application process is used, should payments be on a first come, first served basis without regard for proportionalizing each request to the total cumulative need of all requests? A resounding unanimous no. Question 10, if funding authorities disallow CVRF funding for individual citizens, should council authorize general fund reserves for such a distribution? That was a resounding no also. So those were our internal surveys in order to get a consensus on where we were going for goals. In the meantime, we've just received preliminary guidance from DOLA on their opinion of our strategy proposals. The conclusions are that our goal of simplification will not fly. We may have a small chance that a differing opinion may be available in 12 days, but we are proceeding with a certain application process because it's very slim that will change. Frankly, there are billions in aid programs for both businesses and individuals, whereas this program has about $500,000 to distribute. my strong suggestion is to go to these two websites and thoroughly utilize those massive programs for assistance that will make a larger difference to you. There's two websites, energizecolorado.com/gap-fund. That's for businesses. There's a ton of programs there. And there's also for citizens, stayatHome.colorado.gov/get-help-now. We will make these links available on the city's COVID webpage for those of you trying to transcribe what I just said. Don't worry about it. We'll get it there. I'm going to ask the city staff to figure out the gaps in these funding programs for gaps that we may assist with our limited $500,000 funds. Councilmember Neal's distribution tool, which I analyzed yesterday, was set up for basic accounting expenses using the existing applications. We now have different guidance. We can modify that. Clearer guidance on specifics will be coming as we gain clarity of areas and gaps we can actually assist in more significance. I welcome Councilmember Neal to give us 10 to 15 minutes of presentation of that tool at this time, and then we'll have council discussion followed by public discussion. Councilmember Neal. Your choice.
I will go ahead and do it from here. I think it's got a better microphone. If not, I'll move over to the other one.
Thank you.
Let's go to.
You guys are coming through loud and clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need your expert input from time to time. Thank you.
I don't know about that, but I can hear you well.
Well, that's my
I need to
characterization.
come out of this before you can select. Okay. And so I'll let you go ahead and get us to the sharing. Here we go. There we go. Okay. I did go ahead and prepare 3 simple slides after the mayor and I had a demonstration where he is an engineer, I'm an engineer. So he really bored down into the formulas so that he could understand all the algorithms behind it. I'm not going to spend any time on that. I have had the opportunity to demonstrate it to quite a few, the output of the model to many people, including Catherine, who's here in the audience, and Shannon Anderson and her husband, Carl, who have administered the PPP. So I wanted to make sure they had a chance to see it at a minimum and provide feedback. They did offer some ideas for what I call knobs, which are variables that we as a council can change. We haven't decided what they are. We haven't discussed them, but there are knobs that are already built in the model. So you can see how quickly we can play with ideas, adjust the caps, adjust floors. There's just several knobs that we can play with to see notional results, and then that can help us to come to a decision what the final settings are when we actually ran it for real. A couple points about the model itself. It is a 100% objective. From the time, I mean, theoretically, it could be completely hands-off if we took the time to script some computer databases behind the scenes, but it is a 100%. The output from your applications will go directly in. We have the ability to mask company names, so the model wouldn't even know it, and you'll see that it's set up company 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could be 1,000 companies. They're all masked. So there's an effort to protect identity for those that have expressed a concern about their numbers getting out. There would have to be an unmasking by a designated person for actually cutting the check where you map what company 1 is, but that is the extent, or for audit purposes. The model makes no differentiation between types of businesses. Therefore, a business is a business is a business. It's simply an entity to the model. Also, there's no differentiation between types of incomes. Sales based companies have submit taxes. Services do not submit sales taxes, and there are companies that do both or made up. The model doesn't care. It just takes into account net income. There's no differentiation between profits or nonprofits. The model right now is set up to be 100% loss-based. A lot of the dialogue we haven't finalized, but the leaning at the time I built the model was listening to what I was hearing council, and was based on a draft process guide, the first 3 pages in it, where it had indicated we always wanted to be loss-based, and that was a lot of the recommendations from both Shannon and from Catherine. The size of a company, I have not built that into the model at this instant in time, but once you see how easy it is to build knobs, we can build that in. I'm comfortable that the mayor could review it and test it and testify that yes, that is in fact the way it functions. I did want to seize upon the individual recommendation of Mr. Paff from the presentation last time. And one of the things he had said that keyed me why I went ahead and built the model is I wanted to simplify the staff time. So by building a model, it's microseconds now. Once we just take the raw output data and just input it into a model that we could then justify for any audit. It is built right now with the labels and the thoughts that it would be a second quarter net income comparison between 2019 to 2020. That's how the model is built, to show the loss. Based on the guidance we're starting to get from DOLA last night, the mayor and I did discuss, could the model be adjusted so that it could be expenditure based. Our opinion is, without trying to do it, is yes, we could adjust it so it is expenditure based. But right now, for demonstration purposes, you'll see labels second quarter net income to 1 year to the other. And with that, 5 minutes, I'm going to take the last bit of time and just go ahead and go to the next slide. Here, real quickly, are some of the knobs that we could play with. If we decided to cap an amount we gave to an entity, and I'm going to say entity because we could actually adjust this model so that if we were forced to go to individuals and the council felt it was worth the extra labor, an entity could be a social security number or an EID. It doesn't matter, EIN. It could be a business or an individual, although it would take a little bit of tweaking for the individual. But if we decided that there should be some sort of a cap on the amount that an entity received, it's literally punch in what caps do we want to play with. $500, and I say 500 because the notion of a $5,000 cap, well, with expenditures, it may be a different discussion. But if it's just net income with the number of companies we have, we're talking about hundreds of dollars for distribution, not thousands of dollars. But there is a possibility to put a cap in there. There was a suggestion to add a floor. So if we want to say, well, we don't want to spend or distribute money to a company that's only suffering a 1% net loss, when we got other companies that are suffering a 60%, before we give somebody with such a minor, let's go ahead and, on the first iteration, it's kind of like a handicap. They would get a chunk of money that those suffering very low losses would not get that first iteration chunk of money, but they would on the second iteration. So they would still get a chunk of money. It's just if we set a floor, they wouldn't get the first round of iteration. And normally it will take 2 iterations going through the entire distribution of any model or money that we would receive. So that is built in there. There was feedback, should a resident resident-owned business have a priority over a non-resident-owned business. The features in there, it's really a binary, but that can be adjusted if we chose to do that. I'm not saying it is, because I can think of businesses that have been here for 50 years, even though they're not, the business owner is not a resident. After 50 years, there's kind of a compelling argument that they should be treated no different. So the feature could be used, doesn't have to be used. Do we add any input for perishable inventory losses? That could probably be handled at the upfront application, but we could factor that into the objective distribution. Do we provide assistance to companies with history of net loss of income? And I guess this is the fair market or the free market Republican. I am registered Republican, for the record. It's open source. If a company is showing a history of losses, net losses, they may go under, regardless of whether we give them $100 or not. So is it better served to give that $100 to somebody that might do better with it? A discussion, it's a capability that can be used, doesn't have to be used. All of these are capabilities. I put other because if there's more ideas, the model can be modified. It is not a final product. Steps within the model, quickly, because I don't want to bog down. All you do is the model takes the second quarter 2019, you enter the second quarter 2020, you subtract one for the other to show the raw dollar loss, but a raw dollar loss doesn't really mean anything. You've got to convert it to a percentage of income loss to really understand what is the net pain a business is feeling. Once you've got an individual business percentage loss, there needs to be a calculation to compare what that means relative to all other businesses' losses, so that there is a relative calculation adjustment. Then you set the floors or the caps, you run the model, you then apply the floors to what the model wants to say, and then you iterate until the funds are all distributed. It normally takes 2 iterations. I'm not going to explain mathematically why, but it normally takes 2 iterations. And then you sum the distribution amounts that each entity would be entitled to, sum it, and cut one check. That's the model in a nutshell. Council members, questions before I just go ahead and show?
Yeah, when you're done, we'll do questions.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, I am not going to get too bogged down. Got it, that's right. Okay. Yep. Go ahead. Okay, hopefully all of the public can see this. And the real purpose is to show, because when you're distributing, $500,000 worth of money to the public, I'm sure everybody's going to say there'll be allegations, no matter how fair it is, no matter how hard we try to show we're above water. The model is to help convince the citizens that there's no hanky-panky. We're going to give it out, and it's going to be a blind distribution based on decisions made before we see any output, and the output becomes the output. Okay. Very simply, what I did on this model is I made a mini woodland park, meaning we have about 2,000-ish businesses. So I could speed up my thought process. I chose 40 as a good number to represent Woodland Park. So I have a mini Woodland Park that was made up of 40 companies. I know you see 42 right now, and I'll talk to those last 2, but later. I built the model with 40 companies and scaled a dollar amount to distribute equal to what at the time I was playing with it, $300,000 or $400,000 would be the equivalency to some form of an $8.8 million comparison. So what you'll see is a number later on. the model was run that you're seeing, it's right here. The number or the dollar amount that the model is currently showing is $8,300 that would be the equivalent to a 40 company Woodland Park. All we did is you take the two and get a dollar loss. As you can see, some of here, this is where Mayor Carr brought in some interesting business situations where you may have had a company that was last year operating in the red, this year he's in the black. The model, if somebody were to apply for it, will catch it. Anything in red would be a company that ends up not entitled, because what that red show is a negative loss, and it's kind of a double negative. That means they're actually operating at a positive, so they would not be entitled to anything. And what you'll see is the eligibility. It goes to 0% of the distribution for anybody or any entity that actually made money and still applied. There are a couple interesting ones in the top 4 company entries where we have companies that you take a negative loss and they get worse. The model worked for it. We had companies that had a positive in 2019 that went negative. The model works for that. We were trying to stress the model, and we were fairly comfortable that we had all permutations. This here is where we had the option. We could put in a floor. Right now, the floor is set at 0. So this 20% change, they are 20% eligible, unlike this business right here where they're not eligible because they didn't show a loss. Then with the floor, it's set at 0, so it remained the same. But if I were to put in a floor of 21%, in other words, you had to show 21% loss, this top company right here where it says 20% change, he's eligible for 20, but with the floor set at 21%, that would instantly go to 0. This is where we do the relative, because all of these percentages are relative to the individual business, which is 1303%. It's got to be converted to 100% because we're going to only distribute 100% of the money. Therefore, you need a relative equivalent, and that's what this column's for. You run the model, and we distribute I've gone too far, the $8,300, and it gives, the first cut is the prorated distribution. But now there are some other, this is where the knobs come into effect, where we have some, if we had a residency cap, that would kick in here, which would throttle back what somebody, some entity would be entitled to. Where you can see it working is this company would be entitled to 1,000 raw, but with a residency cap, if we use that, set at 200, they're capped at 200. So the model is working, the knobs are working. Then you really simply have to determine what is the lesser of all of these caps or floors compared to what their original loss was. And I want to align this one right here, this company right here, because it's the lesser of everything. This company's relative pain, given how small the company is and the percentage of loss. It may have been a 40 or 50% loss to that company. Raw, they should have been entitled to $351, but their loss was only 138. So they're capped at what they get, the 138, which means they are made 100% whole. What you can see in pink over here, we are not going to make any, as Mr. Paff said, we're not going to make anyone whole, or very, very few businesses will be made whole. They'll simply get some assistance. That's all $500,000 will do for a company, for a city the size of Woodland Park with our businesses. So a little bit of an expectation management. I played it with some very large numbers to distribute. and everybody gets, well, it took 5 iterations of the model to distribute a disproportionate. In other words, if we had received 10 or $20 million, it would have taken 5 distribution or iterations to get it all equitably distributed, but it does work. The model still has the 5 iterations, but once you scale it back to what we really have relative to the City of Woodland Parks, true revenue, 2 iterations is the most that we will ever see it go through. And I think that's probably as much detail as council at this point in time or the public needs, Mayor.
Thank you. Of course, with my applied math minor, my software engineering hat, and my accounting background, he and I got together pretty quickly, ran through this. We unfortunately, since he put this presentation together, we've had different parameters told to us, and we're going, but this tool works. He calls it a model, I call it a tool. It's a tremendous tool. I fully think this will help us in a lot of regards, but we're going to have to change some of the columns because of our direction from DOLA, but it still is going to work. We also have various parameters, which was on a different slide. In addition, we have need-based, and we have the council can decide need-based, they can decide parameters, and they can decide things like certain business types ranking. So we have all that capability in there. It's trivial for Excel people like Councilmember Neal and myself, and probably others out there. But it's pretty trivial to make a change on this from net income differential to need-based, which is our direction we have now, or actual expenditure, COVID-19 related expenditures. So some of the early columns there that we're talking about net income, it was great. We had it all wired, and now we've got changed less than 24 hours ago. But this tool works great for it anyway. Councilmember Neal and I have already talked about how to change this. We have availability of all kinds of other parameters we can stick in here. I'm going to suggest that we put together a list of these knobs and these variables and some suggestions. I'll put them in we'll put them in a survey or a poll or something very shortly, and have council go through this. The intent is tonight to kind of put some of these things on the table. You all got the Clay Brown guidance, which kind of threw a monkey wrench into things for us, and but this tool still works, and with some modification. And I'm happy to continue to assist. We're going to need some things that I mentioned already in my introduction from staff in talking about the gaps and things like that. But we can pretty well come to a defined list for management of this from a standpoint of the staff management with this tool and some council definitions on some of these variables. But they're all easily put in here, trivial. So despite some of the columns here that we're talking about, this tool will still work very easily. It'd take less than a half day to fix it to the new reality. Council comments.
Yeah, Mayor.
Councilmember Zuluaga.
First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge some friends of mine who are here from a nonprofit. Some of the things you may have missed that the mayor talked about is the application process is already out. I understand from talking with you earlier, there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community of how these funds, where we are with these funds. So I just want to take just the layman's approach to that so people can see it. We last week approved application forms, and those application forms, the mayor was the lead on this, and he went and looked at other cities around the state, other counties, and looked at what they had looked at when you look at the CARE Act funds and the requirements that come from the feds, then took the state DOLA requirements and merged them together to make a questionnaire that complies with how these funds have to be given out. We can't just say from a city standpoint, oh yeah, you can have these funds, you can have these funds. There's real specific criteria And some of them they need to be for COVID-related things. So an example that they gave us is like those plexiglass barriers, PPE, different things, or like tables for outside or something if you're a restaurant or some sort of business like that. Things that actually help establish the social distancing, do the different things that are required, and to still conduct business. So that's one aspect of it. But there's also some really creative reasons that people are requesting the funds. So having said that, we're under a time crunch. We're under a time crunch for administering these funds. However, you can apply for these funds to projected losses to the end of the year, till December of 2020. And go ahead.
Maybe mid-September right now is when our first initial pass is, but we're talking maybe 15th of September, maybe 30th of September.
Right, so that is where for the application, but you can, where I was going with that part of it was to say that you can look at your budgets, whatever type of business you are, and say, okay, well, we're going to have expenses on COVID-related items through the end of the year. So you can allocate what you think you're going to need, but as the mayor's saying here, to actually get your application in and to be able to be in the hopper for it, we're estimating end of September, and then if I understand correctly, it's about the end of October that the funds actually have to be fully dispersed. So, and as far as questions, I don't know how you want to handle that.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet, so just hold your questions in. So what came down this morning, and so just for the public that you understand, Councilman Paff last week tried to present a model that really simplified the administration of these funds. We thought, great, we can do something on a general level so we don't have to have everybody apply. That didn't work out. When we got a letter today from the administrator of DOLA, they basically said, that's not going to work. So we tried to do it, and it might still work. We wanted to do it with water was the second for private citizens. And then for business, it was going to be based on sales tax. And then today, Rusty's explained his model, and hopefully we can use some parts of that once we have the applications. But so that's the basic. Anyone right now can go online and apply. But you do have to have expenditures that are legitimately you're able to deduct from what the feds say and what DOLA says. And then you want to talk about the process of who reviews it? Or, I mean, I'm just trying to give, I guess just trying to give you a lay understanding of this, that we're under parameters, you're under a timeline if you're a business and you want to apply for these funds. So go on the site, apply, and then as Mayor said in his introduction, there's 2 links to millions, billions of dollars of money that's out there for businesses. So it may not be of this pool of $500,000, but there's a bunch of funds out there.
Our process right now is we have an active application. The application still works for the new direction we got from DOLA, which was intentional. We knew that piece was always going to be there. So we have made sure that we're in line there. We're going to focus in on some gaps in these other programs, which I already asked staff to look at. But we're in the process of refining a review process, which will include, I think, will include this tool, which will be helpful. We'll have to change it, columns, several columns there we're going to have to change, but it's trivial. It's trivial. And with the understanding that my intention is to come to council and say, we've got these knobs, we've got these variables. I could do this in a heartbeat if it was a SEEK program, but I can't anymore. So we're going to do it in Excel. But we still have a lot of review criteria, including need including defining whether we want to worry about resident, non-resident, all those things that were listed up there. And so that right now, what we do know, we have certain knowns, is an application process. And in the next probably 2-3 weeks, we will come very close to having a well-defined review process. Any Councilmember Case, I can't see you, but would you like to weigh in?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate everything that's been presented tonight. I think that it's very well thought out. I like the fact that it has the ability to be easily
Manipulated.
tweaked, if you will, or manipulated, so that we can see what if scenarios as we evaluate how this works. And the fact that we can substitute expenditures for revenues, it's just a number. It has to be substantiated. It has to be certain criteria for eligibility for reimbursement. And I like the fact that we can easily plug numbers and have results without a lot of, staff time, a lot of brain damage. So thank you to Rusty for putting that together. It's awesome to have a tool that simplifies all that for all of us. And I don't want to mislead the public. We haven't made any decisions yet. We've made a decision on the application process, and it's available now. And decisions are being made and coming. So I appreciate the hard work, and I guess, Mr. Mayor, what are the next steps?
Well, my plan with council's concurrence, I guess, is to put a list of these variables together, give real choices. Me with my programming mind and Rusty and I with our engineering mind. There's a lot of people here smarter than me anyway, but this is trivial for us, but it's not trivial for just regular people who don't think like
Right.
us. And so
I just was wondering what we're looking for this evening. What kind of decision or outcome are you looking for from the council this evening?
Thank you. My intention is not to come to a decision today, but discuss the new paradigm, really.
Okay.
And then council will have more decisions to make in the next week or two based on this input. I think this is a tremendous tool. I think we can use it still as a distribution proportionalization tool. And
Absolutely.
And with the addition of if council wants to needs basis variables and resident, non-resident, there's a whole, there's 10 different things. I would choose to put those to council in a multiple choice sort of situation, or a ranking sort of like we did on the survey. And hopefully everybody would input to that, because that'll be critical to get consensus on those things. Understand, public, we're doing the best we can. It's not much money. It sounds like it'd be a lot of money in my bank account, but it's not a lot of money when you divide it up amongst the possibilities. And we're going to do the best we can, and with limited expertise, no matter what we think we can do, we're going to do the best we can. And we're going to come to consensus as your representatives on council. But that's kind of my plan, Councilmember Case, is to go forth. And in other words, tonight's, we're kind of presenting where we're at.
Thank you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And thank you to everyone for their hard work and efforts. All of you. Sorry I can't be there this evening. I'm trying to protect you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what's wrong with me, but I'm sure a lot of people have an opinion.
There's a lot of opinions, yeah. City Attorney Myers has had his hand up.
Well, we all have our moments.
I have a list too.
Thank you for sharing.
For myself.
I didn't realize I didn't have a mic until I went to open my mouth, but some things for council to consider, things we might need to drill down on a little bit more. I'm looking at the email from Clay Brown from DOLA, just so the public's aware. It's 5 pages of information to kind of dig through in some of the discussions about expenditures versus business losses. And there is a sentence in here I think we might as staff want to look further into on your behalf, but it says that costs of business interruption caused by required closures would constitute eligible expenditures of fund payments. And so we may or may not need actual expenses. We may be able to have the model as it is. I don't want to provide false hope, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. The other piece of this I wanted to point out, the formulate, it says lastly, a formulaic distribution is most likely not to meet the intent of the legislation. I think this still meets it, but I would add the caveat that there's going to have to be some review that the application is complete, that the information provided is legitimate, that it meets the criteria before we enter them, we staff enter that into this model for distribution. So to your point, I think a lot of this can be automated, but some parts of it can't be, or we do that to our own risk as a community. And in that regard, same vein, to your point about, you're right, the CVRF funds generally are intended to cover through the end of the year expenses. So the city, in our portion, we've expended or projected out, and the I guess guidance or consideration you might have from my perspective as the attorney, if we're allowing that, having some sort of agreement with the individuals, businesses, that if they don't spend that money in the way that they've said they needed to or would, that it come back to the city so we can get it back to where it belongs, as opposed to it coming out of the citizens' coffers in the form of it not being eligible and then it having to not be reimbursed by DOLA. Does that make sense? Am I trying to be clear?
Yep.
I think it's a fair point, but just making sure that the taxpayers are covered in a scenario where it doesn't get expended. So those were some of the questions or thoughts I wanted you to have as you're considering all these things. Thank you for sharing your mic.
Thank you.
I- I also noticed that too, Jason, in that statement from Clay Brown about that business interruption. That is directly relevant on revenue. So I noticed that as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you. We have a whole hopper full of things to put into our decision process, and some of them will be easily programmed, some of them will not. And the sentence that the city attorney, I have it highlighted on my sheet in red hot. The formulaic distribution is most likely not going to meet the intent of the legislation. The author of this had our plan in front of them, so they were basically doing a critique on that plan specifically. So that's why we've kind of in the last not even 24 hours, but at least today, since this morning, have had to change thought process on our strategy. But we will have a whole bunch of things in the hopper, and somebody has to collect those. I'm sure it's the city clerk, but no, we as a council will collect them together. We have a mechanism that's going to be put together. We've been quite successful in collecting things, but we're going to start out with a lot of question and answer, these knobs that Councilmember Neal talks about. They're variables in my C programming experience. We do have quite a few things that are going to register into this parameter. I would be interested if somebody's had an action item to do some of those things the city attorney talked about, because it might change our thinking back again. The good news is here's where we're at. We have an application that works no matter which model we go with. We have a model that works with the old way, and we have with the expertise that Councilmember Neal and I have, we can change that model to the new paradigm in less than an hour. And so we're in good shape either way. So we've got some time. We've got this application process out there, and the applications are still valid. You'll have to show your expenditures and what your projections are for those COVID-related expenditures. Okay, COVID impacted, coronavirus impacted expenditures. And we will be putting together an extensive list as we hear all the brilliant ideas that come in from the public, in addition to all the ones that are already registered throughout the state. There's hundreds of them already. Mayor Pro Tem.
You were
Millar.
looking at me like I had something to say, and I guess the only thing I really have to add to this is you know, we've seen some models from some other cities and other counties. Basically, they just boiled it down as simply as they could and said, if you are a business that has under 25 employees, we're going to give you assistance for the PPE money that you had to spend for the protective equipment. And that's it. That's all they're going to do. And I know that several of us, all of us, were concerned about how to make this the most equitable as possible to all businesses in Woodland Park, because we are a very small community. I think that Councilmember Neal's model is doing the best that it can to make it as equitable as possible. I think that it's difficult because I think that Councilmember Paff's model had a good point in how do you determine who to serve, and if you're choosing smaller businesses, do they serve, this is going to sound bad, but this is the truth of it, right? Do they serve the community as well as some of the higher revenue businesses with sales tax? Because do they have more employees? Do they generate more tax? Do they create more wealth for the community, which is then spread among the community? But it puts us all in a precarious position. No one is going to be completely happy with any decision we make because it's not fair. This decision isn't fair. It can only be equitable. So some people may get $400, some people may get $25. With the amount of money we have, it's likely it won't be 1,000 or several thousand to anyone. And the concern I had brought up at the last meeting was with Councilmember Paff's model was, but that's not including dog groomers, hairstylists, you know, nail technicians, restaurants, our movie theater. Our movie theater hasn't been able to be open at all. They're open now, but they're not going to get any new release films for the entire rest of the year. So they're just doing the best that they can. And how do we serve them? So we're really in a tight spot with the decision making. Councilmember Neal's model gives us sort of a blind way to do it because we don't touch who it is and we don't see who it is. It won't be us gathering the applications personally. We won't be touching any of it. So it's a blind way to do it numerically, which makes it equitable in my opinion and my opinion alone. And so I appreciate the effort that you've gone to build the model. Like everyone has said, we need to tweak it perhaps. Everybody's going to have an opinion on how to do that. And my goal will just be to make sure that it is as equitable as possible to all. And that's the best that we can do. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The piece I wanted to address, the city attorney and I talked about this yesterday, and there's been some concern about privacy issues. We have a mechanism that we're setting up that's very, very private, including we're going to allow you to mail in your financials, which means you don't have them digitally in the internet universe, and redacted and all that kind of stuff. So we have some. We don't have the facilities that banks have or the access to information. We're limited by what we can gather and what we can legitimately do with those things and check up on things. But we're going to do the best we can with our privacy issues. We're going to be very highly attentive to that. I won't see any who's doing what. None of us on council will see who applied what at all. And it will be very closely held, just like all the financials are in the financial department. The other thing is I wanted to make sure that these variables we talk about are going to be the best we can do. As Mayor Pro Tem said, we're going to do the best we can do. We'll have 6 different opinions on how to rank different things or not, and we'll do the best we can with our consensus. But we really want to make sure that people understand that when you're filling out the applications, remember they're COVID related, and at Councilmember Zuluaga's point, their expenses are through December 30th. And the applications talk about exactly what that time frame is, but we have to be done allocating the money by October 30th. That's our current guidance. Councilmember Paff.
So just looked up the Bureau of Economic Analysis's numbers on gross domestic product for the county, for Teller County, and the BEA is probably the best organization at calculating these numbers. Nothing's absolutely perfect, but the gross domestic product of, and they only go down to the county level, the gross domestic product of Teller County is $937 million in 2018. It will certainly go down this year. It was probably up last year. So roughly $1 billion is our gross domestic product. When I took 675,000 and figured that what percentage that is of $937 million, it is 0.07% of the county. If we take into account that Cripple Creek, for its size, probably outweighs its number of gross domestic product because of the casinos, I don't know, let's take 100 million out of that maybe. Huh? And the gold mine, yeah, good point, yeah. So 150. I mean, we got maybe not even 0.1%. So what we have spent 2 hours last council meeting and nearly 1 hour this time discussing, I would just encourage everyone to take 0.1% for every business, 0.1% of your revenue, and see what that number is. So, you know, I think we've put a whole lot of time into it, and it's really not going to have any effect at all. And it's a government program that will now, for a approximately 1/10 of 1% benefit, will have every business in this city that would like to participate providing, whether digitally or on paper, their profit and loss statement to the city. So you can decide if that's what you want to do. But that's the actual perspective of what we're doing here that I think we haven't spent enough time considering. So just keep that in mind. I think about 2,000 businesses that are registered with the city-ish.
Yes, and that would include folks like Lowe's down in Colorado Springs who come up here to install windows.
Yeah, and so we don't know what the actual domicile businesses are, but let's say 1,700. That might average out to what, $325 to $350 per business. So we're spent 3 hours talking about maybe a $350 benefit on average for anyone, unless we pick out particular winners that we want to win, which I'm not saying that Rusty's plan does that. It doesn't. It has an objective criteria in it, but that's just our perspective, folks. That's what we're talking about here. So, and we've expended some outside of council, some emotional energy on this as well. So I'm looking forward to getting the freak past this so we can get to some serious issues, and hopefully the type of issues that would really warrant a special council meeting. No disrespect for calling this particular one, but I mean, let's get the freak on to the next thing as quick as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Zuluaga.
Thank you. So Councilmember Pfaff puts it in the perfect perspective, and that's exactly right. So we have somewhere under 2,000 businesses who have the potential to apply between now and, if I'm understanding, the end of September at this point. So we have, of that number, if I'm understanding it, let's say we get 600 applications. We may not even get that many because 600 of you may not be interested in chasing $300 and sharing your personal financials. But if we got that many, let's just say that, would we then, this is my question combination for, and Mr. Mayor, notwithstanding that we're going to take this whole list of criteria and whittle that down to some workable parameters, but then we're going to put those into the software after the city has reviewed these, let's say 600 applications. And then are we going to take that pool of 500 $500,000. Are we going to then plug that into whatever the bells and whistles are of the software and end up spitting out a proportion? How are we going to then, I guess my question is, for people who know they put an application in, what can they expect back? If they're one of 600 versus one of 2,000, that's more of a distribution. And if they're one of 200, that's more of a distribution. So can we talk a little about what that would look like so that people have an expectation of what they're putting their time and energy into in this application process?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, there's no idea what that looks like. I mean, we're in the infancy of this. We're
Point of
talking.
order here. I'd like to say that Mr. Zulawaga had a question that could be duly answered, and if council member.
I was talking to the mayor.
After that,
Thank you.
he can wait.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'll get to you in a second.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Both points are very valid. We do not know yet, but the relativity, it's not going to be a simple division process. The model goes through various parameters, and it'll depend on actual COVID-related expenditures and allocations. We have some information that the city attorney has talked about that they're going to investigate from the city staff standpoint, which could impact that quite a bit. We've got council, as the Mayor Pro Tem said, we've got variables that we're going to talk about and try to come to consensus on. There's no way to predict it. And so I would exercise caution in the public to not do a division process, because that's not even close to what's going to happen. Councilmember Case, you were asking to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't want to incite the public. We're trying to help. It may only be a few $100s, but I think what is important here is we're trying to help. We have some funds that we're trying to equitably distribute to the public and help them out, whatever small amount that might be. I think it's important to them. What I've heard, it's important to them. There's people that won't even apply because they don't trust the process because of what we're experiencing this evening. And so, I mean, there's a minimum of 12 businesses and 4 nonprofits because of what's going on with this council, they don't trust. And so, and won't apply. And so I'm hoping that maybe we can come together and come up with something that's equitable and objective, that we can at least help them as much as we possibly can, and with what we have. And so thank you for allowing that, Mr. Mayor. If we could move to the next step, that would be great. We don't know what it looks like, but we're sure trying to make it the best we can, in my perspective. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So council, look in the next few days for emails from me that will collect different information and look for emails to start talking about some of these variables and rankings, and even a survey. Hopefully all of us will participate in. City Attorney Myers.
So if I could provide, we have limited information based off of the business licenses that we currently have as we currently run things. COVID was never an anticipation and all of that. So what we do have on file is very limited to what exists. So we have we have roughly 2,000 business licenses that exist. I don't know exactly what the breakdown is off the top of my head, but we do have it broken down into 4 separate categories based off of Woodland Park. I don't know how that's defined. Teller County, outside of Teller County, and outside of the state of Colorado. So we can get that information so that council and the public can kind of have a better idea of what this might look like. Because I think we're starting from the 2,000 number, making some decent assumptions of what we think the number is of people businesses that might be eligible, but the number might be completely different. We don't know, but we can certainly get you that information so that you can have a little better idea as we try to narrow this issue down as to how to do it. I just want to make sure council wants that information before we go to the work of getting it to you. So I'll put that on my list of to-dos.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. We'll see that tomorrow morning about 9, I assume. Just kidding, just kidding. So thank you. I think I think we need to spend about 74 more hours on this per Councilmember Paff's request. But seriously, we will do what we can in the time as allowed. We will come to a point where we will say enough is enough. And I appreciate everybody's input here. Any more council comments? None at this time. I'm going to open up this to public comment, to public hearing. I don't have a list in front of me. Anybody want to speak on this issue with the new paradigm? Catherine, please. I'm sorry, Ms. Perry. Ms. Perry.
Beauty of a small
Sorry.
town. Thank you. Catherine Perry again at 330 Ponderosa Court in Woodland Park. And just very disappointed to hear DOLA's response. It sounds just like a bunch of bureaucrats. You can't make it simple. You can't let business owners get about the business they need to be doing, and you can't use real models to do it. I would say, to your point, Mr. Carr, what Rusty has prepared, I think, is a brilliant perspective on how to equitably distribute the funds based on loss, and don't abandon it too quickly. I know you're not saying abandon it, but don't abandon the revenue perspective too quickly, because I would challenge that your guy at DOLA that said this won't work, as you pointed out, didn't begin to have a clue what he was looking at. He didn't understand the model at all or what it tried to do. And when our city attorney points out that business interruption is a reasonable factor to include, revenue is certainly, as Councilmember Case pointed out, the demonstrative figure of that impact. To your point, Ms. Labar, I would say that the self-employed, the nail techs, the hairstylists that you've talked about, as you pointed out, there have been hundreds of trillions of dollars thrown at this already. For the self-employed, the PPP replaced 2.5 months of 2019 net profit. And they all were allowed to return to work in some form or fashion May 1st, essentially out of work for 6 weeks. So 10 weeks of revenue replacement, 6 weeks of shutdown. In addition, all those small business, self-employed, sole proprietors were qualified for the EIDL program through the SBA, which was on top of the PPP. So my challenge to you guys would be, I know that in your hearts you're representing the 8,200 citizens and you want to spread it as far as you can. But if you spread that money as thin as I'm hearing you say, several $100s per entity, you will do no good whatsoever. Any business that $300 makes the difference between their survival or their failure, it was pointless. And $500,000 is wasted in the process. So I would challenge you guys to take a little bit of time to step back. And as Ms. Labar pointed out, to look at the businesses that have widespread impact in the community. Movie theater was a perfect example. If that movie theater shuts down because he is still being impacted by restrictions, government forced restrictions, industry forced restrictions, what is the impact to all 8,200 citizens and far and wide the tourists coming to town? So don't try to spread it so thin that it becomes useless. Make that $500,000 bridge the gaps, as you pointed out, the very, very real and easily identified gaps. And I would not abandon revenue replacement as quickly as a DOLA bureaucrat thinks we should. My thought.
Thank you. I agree with you. We Rusty and I have put this, he calls it a model, I call it a tool. It's an excellent distribution tool. And it's got all kinds of nice bells and whistles that we can play with, but we've archived that and I don't intend to lose that capability. Good thing with Excel is we have 65,000 columns we can use. And so we will quickly go to this other model, but I made a point in here that was kind of hidden in my remarks. In 12 days, we will get actual Q&A from the funding authority above the DOLA. That's my understanding. I have a follow-up question to DOLA about that. I feel that we're under the gun with what they've given us. I'm disappointed also because we had an excellent way to do this. Councilmember Neal and I sat down yesterday and went through things with my accounting hat, my engineering hat, my programming hat, and boy, in short order, we had this really hopping for all the possibilities. And he and I talked about other things that that are past this slide, by the way. There's another version that's even tighter than this, but we will not abandon that for sure. It's disappointing to me for exactly why you said. I would like to have some impact, but there's various opinions up here. Some of it came out in this survey that some council wanted to help the real little persons. Your point in your remarks that you made 2 or 3 weeks ago, I listened to all that several times. You made the point that the impact to the city may be on a different level. There's various of us that agree with you, various of us that don't agree. So yes, I understand exactly what you're saying. And some of the other municipalities have talked about impact, but you know, if we could give the little tiny businesses 5,000 each and the impact people 10 grand or 25 grand or 50 grand, boy, we'd be making everybody happy, but we'd pretty well eat that up in a hurry. So thank you for your comments. I empathize with the comments. Thank you. Any other public comments? Do we have anybody on Zoom? Nobody on Zoom. Anybody in the audience want to weigh in on? Thank you. All right, so council, look for some emails. Thank you, Councilmember Neal, for your excellent work. And this tool, in my terms, will live again another day. Okay, without further ado, I guess I close public comment and we're moving on. We have no motions on the floor. Ordinances on initial posting, none. Public hearings, none. New business, none. We're down to reports. On the 8:20 agenda, we've added, because they got delayed the last time, the vendor fee and business license to the September 3rd agenda. But City Clerk Leclerc.
Thank you. We voted at the last council meeting to table it to the next meeting. So those items will be on the August 20th agenda unless council decides to table them another time to the 9/3 because the 8:20 agenda is very full.
Thank you. I read ahead too far. Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. So on the 8:20 agenda, we'll have those, but we're going to probably have to consider to move those to the September 3rd, but we will do that at the next meeting. I have nothing further for a mayor's report. Councilmember Labar.
No, I just wanted to briefly mention, I think that I'd appreciate hearing from any of the Main Street members. Maybe I was reading in one of the DOLA emails that Main Street is going to be given, and I don't think this means our local Main Street, but they're going to also be given mini grants, scholarships, and opportunities for business consulting through the DOLA grants. And that may come down to our local Main Street. So they may also be of service to the community through these, not this particular fund that we'll be receiving, but through other funds, the main, how do you say that? Main Street, the national Main Street will be receiving, but I'm not sure. So but that may be another avenue for help as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Yes, there are some programs being run through other nonprofits that aren't even listed on those lists and links I talked about. So I appreciate you bringing that up because there are other opportunities. Councilmember Case.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Neal.
Yeah, I just want to let the citizens know, or the businesses know, that if they want to look at it and tweak and play with the numbers, you can send me an email. I will tell you which fields are the variable entry fields. I use the term knob, but they're variable entry fields. I'll tell you which ones. You can put numbers in, play with it, and it may help the business make a decision whether it's worth the effort, because both Mr. Zuluaga and Mr. Path have been spot on in terms of this is not a lot of money to be distributed. If somebody wants to get philanthropic and just say it's not worth the effort in terms of exposure of data, I give my $50 or my $300. Maybe it's a philanthropic big business that's going to get one of the roaring $500 district. You can make a decision because you'll see approximately what you would get, and maybe that pool of applications dwindles so that the ones that excuse me, that are really hurting, they're going to fill out the application, whether it's $10 they get or $500. By some companies deciding not to apply when they see it's not worth the effort, all you're doing is helping your fellow businesses by decreasing the pool that the money would be distributed upon or across. So there is a potential that some company might get close to $1,000, but that's up to the businesses to help out and make those decisions. The offer is there. My email address is on the website. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Paff,
Nothing.
Councilmember Zuluaga.
Nothing.
Thank you. Council reports, city attorney report.
Nothing since last week.
Okay. City managers report.
I just have, as the city manager this evening, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the council and commend the council for all of their hard work and dedication to this process. Although you may say to you it's trivial, to us it is not. And I know the amount of staff time that's been saved by all of this hard work, and you have not taken these decisions lightly, and we really appreciate it. So thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We are at the point where I'm going to ask for a motion to move into executive session.
I'll make the motion to move into executive session for discussion of a personal matter under CRS section 246402 4F and not involving any specific employees who have requested discussion of the matter in open session, any member of this body or any elected official, the appointment of any person to fill an office of this body or of an elected official, or personal policies that do not require the discussion of matters personal to particular employees, and the following additional details are provided for identification purposes, evaluation with the city attorney.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Suzanne?
Labar,
Yes.
Neal,
Yes.
Path,
Yes.
Zuluaga,
Yes.
Carr,
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may just, if we can let the public know, no decision, we're not going to come back out and vote on anything. So
Thank
they
you.
can.
The city clerk stated very well what the circumstances are, so we are not coming back to public meeting afterwards.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So you can all tune out. Appreciate it.